All right, let's break down this T-Rex deal, which has David King already roaring. How does it all come to fruition?
So in essence, Port Adelaide tried to orchestrate this mega deal on Saturday, and yet they were trading away their first, second and third round picks. And so they weren't allowed to do it. The AFL looked into their statutes and they found that there was no discretion there. You know, you just can't trade away your entire haul of picks. And so they went back to the mega deal Mark II, as I call it. They traded in Collingwood's future second rounder and Fremantle's future third rounder. And so they now have those future picks to allow this deal to go through. It has been done. In its simplest form, North Melbourne go from losing Jason Horne-Francis to picks 1 and 2. And then they trade 1 to GWS, they get 2 and 3, and they get a Port Adelaide future first rounder, which, let's face it, could be 14, 15, 16. The Port Adelaide Footy Club gets Horne-Francis, Rioli, they trade out this year's 8, next year's future first rounder, plus 43, 53, 57, and they get next year's future second and third rounder. So it's a lot. West Coast trades out Rioli, their number 2 pick this year, and 40, and they get 8 and 12 this year for local talent, which they'll trade in, and then Port Adelaide's future second and third rounder. And GWS, they trade out 3, 12, that Bobby Hill future second rounder. They're getting the number 1 overall pick, who you expected they would take out of Aaron Cadman, the 194-centimetre generational forward. And of course, we told you that one was happening on Thursday. The mega deal has now been struck, and there are ramifications absolutely everywhere.
All right, you are forgiven at home if your head is spinning, because we've all been struggling to make sense. It is very complicated, very convoluted, but at face value, it looks like Port Adelaide come out of this really well. They get their man in Jason Horne-Francis, who 12 months ago was a number 1 draft pick. They get Junior Rioli, and they're not giving up a great deal at number 8 and some back-end picks.
So they move on next year's future first rounder. If Jason Horne-Francis is the star that everyone talked about 12 months ago, if they can get a modicum of the improvement that North Melbourne was not able to get, and then of course they bring in Junior Rioli, to think about these two players playing in a forward line. Now, Asava Ratugolea is a player at Geelong that they're not prepared to give up. Port Adelaide right now has pick 33. They've kept their pick 33 and they're still offering it to Geelong. And so it'll be interesting to think about the list demographic, whether they've gone older or younger. But if they could bring in Asava Ratugolea, now they would almost rival Geelong and Richmond as having won the trade period.
Yeah, so Port Adelaide done extremely well. I think that, well, the Giants, the Greater Western Sydney Giants as well, I think have pick 1, and they've still got 15, 18 and 19. So when you look at the Giants' overall aspect of this as well, they come out extremely strong with some players that they've lost along the way.
But to stay with Port for a sec, I mean, they've done an unbelievable job. They really have. I mean, the picks starting at pick 8, I mean, it's a speculative pick. It starts to get a bit wobbly, in my opinion, towards the back end of, or the middle to back end of the first round. You know what's there, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I think. History tells us that. So Jason Cripps and Port Adelaide, they've won the draft. They've won the trade period already, Ralphie, in my view, to land Horne-Francis and not pay a massive price. Junior Rioli, a specialist half forward. They're hard to find and they have a big impact on your football club. OK, they've lost a few future picks or gone backwards of some spots, but that's an outstanding effort. So it gives them a chance next year to win the flag. And I think this is why there's an urgency there. Boak 34, Dixon 32, Jonas and Lycett are 30 plus as well. So they're for the now. They've nearly said, OK, we've got to fast track the next wave coming through. So you bracket Horne-Francis with Butters, Rosie and Marshall and these guys as the next wave, but it's now for Port. This is Ken Hinkley's flag opportunity right here, right now in 2023.
So where do the Giants see themselves on the premiership clock, because they now have that coveted number 1 pick?
So a club that lots of people would say is dumping salary cap room, they're actually wanting to compete. They feel like they've had 3 or 4 really underperforming years. So even though they're moving on that salary cap, I think if they can bring in Cadman, who again we've talked about a lot, you bring in Toby Bedford, who they acquired today, we'll talk about that one in a second with the Luke Jackson trade, Ivan Soldo, who's a tap ruckman, they are filling in very specific positional needs. Now, Mark McGowan, my colleague at the Herald Sun, has reported today that Jagger O'Meara is someone that they're having a massive crack at. Now, I would imagine that Hawthorn would pay a significant part of his wage. They're very keen to get another top 20 pick in. GWS has picks 18 and 19. I just would say on face value, with the likes of Tom Green and Stephen Canilio and Josh Kelly as those inside midfielders, it doesn't make all the sense in the world. I'm still trying to work my way through it, a story that's only breaking 20 minutes ago on the Herald Sun website. Good
player, O'Meara, no question. I don't think he's in that first round category. Maybe slides to a second, back end of a second. So if Hawthorn were able to, you know, get this sort of deal underway and get a bit of a good feel about it, they'd be rapt to get a first rounder for him. I'm not sure that would occur.
He's not a first rounder, Ralph.
No, we know that.
Well, we don't know that because we think GWS is going to pay that.
Yeah.
So it's only what they're prepared to pay.
No, it's our opinions that I don't think
he comes 7th in the best and fairest. He played 21 games and the team won 8 games this year. So how do you equate that back to first round? You can't. But it's about what the Giants are prepared to pay. It's the same with the old auction theory, isn't it? It's not what their house is worth. It's what someone will pay. So the thing that concerns me with all this is they were prepared to pay picks 3, 12 and a second rounder next year to get pick 1. So if Cadman is the prize that they've chased, it's a significant investment. And I know we'll get to the Kangaroos in a moment, but GWS are no fools. They're not asleep at the wheel here. This is a clear, directional decision.
It's targeted.
To get that guy that they know you can't win a premiership without. We've seen what Cameron's done for Geelong this year. And all reports, you compared him to, what did you say last week?
Well, I compared him, I said that he was Harry Mackay and he was Jeremy Cameron. I spoke to another recruiter today. He said he's not Mackay, he's Charlie Curnow. He jumps to the ball better than I just love everything.
Worse.
I love everything about what this club has done. They've gone out and said, this is the bloke that we want. We're going to go and get him. He's going to make an impact according to his Vic country coach next year. I just think it's sensational. Look at all the midfielders, the dime a dozen midfielders, like Setterfield, like Haitley, like Caldwell that they've got in and they've lost. This bloke's a Vic Country solid citizen, Vic Country co-captain.
He's a jet.
He's going to stay there for 10 years. I think it's brilliant.
So why did the North Melbourne Football Club give up the coveted #1 pick?
Yeah, you know my thoughts on this. I'm extremely frustrated by this. I just don't know at what stage North Melbourne will decide to invest in a tall forward of note. And there's one sitting there, you hold the pick that will secure this guy for a decade. They overlooked Logan McDonald a few years ago and everyone said, OK, you've gone for Phillips, we'll wait and see. OK, and I understand that. It's a wait and see. But when you see what GWS have done to come up the board to get this guy, I think a country Victorian kid, like he's an hour down the road. Like, this is perfect for them. Now, clearly they don't rate him as high as what everyone else does, and that's OK. And time will tell. But it's a big gamble for a football club where not much has gone right for 3 or 4 years.
So can I argue the case for North Melbourne? I don't necessarily agree with it, but they would say we need 7 or 8 good players. We don't just need 1 or 2. They would say that there is a real risk profile with the players who have been picked in the top 10 as key position players. So the last 15 of them over the last 4 or 5 years.
Do you know what there's a risk profile with, Ralphie?
Yeah.
Anyone that's gone to the Kangaroos in the last 3 years has been a risk profile. Staff and players. The joint's in crisis. It has been for some time. So I agree with all that. And that may be all 100% correct. But have a look at, if you don't draft your own power forward, this is the cost that in effect you have to pay down the track. This is the cost of what Jeremy Cameron was for Geelong. It was 3 first rounders and 2 second rounders going back the other way. It's a 2 to 3 year investment at some point down the track. Now, the Kangaroos are a long way from that discussion. I understand that. But when do you start straightening up your spine? The midfield's an easy discussion, and they'll get 2 good midfielders. Yeah. But so will everyone else.
Yeah, I think
we don't know the eye of what they'll be an early pick next year, North Melbourne as well.
No, they won't. They'll be a Port Adelaide pick. So he's going to be the.
So what will
they
get next year? If they finish last next year, North Melbourne, what pick up?
Well, they'll get their own pick, but the problem.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So therefore, they could have the target, Kingy. This Cadman has come a little bit from nowhere, and I understand, you know, the hype around this guy, but I think the 2 mids, looking at it now, the 2 mids, they could have their eye on the best tall forward next year because North Melbourne are not climbing. Yeah. So they could get 2 gun mids this year, and the pressure's on the 2 players they pick up, no question. And the pick 1 next year in 2023 could be the tall forward you're after in that build. Mate,
Horne-Francis was pick 1 last year, gone.
I get it.
Pick 1 this year, gone. For pick 2 and 3.
Yeah, no.
So you're giving up 2 pick 1s for 2 and 3. I don't understand it at all.
Actually, I totally agree with that, and we've had that discussion. But now that the decision has been made, I'm going to myself, OK, they've got to have an eye to this because they're looking at players 2, 3, 4 years ahead. So they may actually have in the back of their mind here, OK, this is the guy we want
but
next year.
Things have changed, mate. Horne-Francis was part of the discussion 6 weeks ago. Now the whole list has turned on its head.
Cadman's changed. Cadman's come from probably outside top 10 to all of a sudden being...
He's Charlie Curnow and Jeremy Cameron.
That's my point.
So let's bottom line.
That's my point. A kid could have a breakout year next year in the second half of the year, like they all do when they're drafted in the top 10, and they get built up, but then you have a bolt up.
Do you like what the Kangaroos have done?
I'm coming to terms with it. On the
yes or no, the tall versus the 2 mids?
I'm going yes now, because I think next year they get their tall, because they won't climb the ladder.